I'm very excited to be sharing with y'all today. I'm sad that it's under the circumstance of Pastor Lane not feeling well, but I'm excited. Very, very excited. Anybody excited? Yeah. All right. Well, I had a whole day to get ready, but you know, Pastor Lane accused me of keeping 4 or 5 sermons in my front pocket. I wouldn't exactly say that, but you know, I just meditated, and God put the story of Joseph in my spirit. I don't know about y'all, but I have go-to places in the Bible, just places I love to read. Does anybody got, like me, I love to read about Noah and Moses and any part of the Bible talking about Jesus. I just really love that. Does anybody else? This is not a go-to for me typically. So I feel like it's from God, and hopefully we can learn something, and maybe it's for somebody. I know I've walked through some of this, probably not to the extent that Joseph did. So I'm going to start in Genesis chapter 37, verse 3, and I'm going to there's about 10 chapters on Joseph. So I'm going to spare y'all, and I'm going to kind of jump from verse to verse a little bit. So now Israel, that was Jacob, loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. Now, I didn't plan this yesterday, but it just came to me during worship that we should have a little fun with this. So I've enlisted some volunteers, but Pastor Philip would bring his older 2 boys up. Pastor Philip's going to play the role of Jacob. And I need some grown men. Emilio, I asked you. Gershom, can I get you to play the role of a grown man? All right, you go down there on the other side of your brother. You come over here. Emilio, Gershom. How about Josh, can I borrow you for a second? And who? This is good enough. This is good for an example. So we have here, the Bible says that Joseph was 17 years old. He's 17. Now, he's taller than the rest of them, but he's a little bit of a baby face. The rest of these are grown men, right, with beards and everything. Matt, can I borrow your coat? So, Jacob, he walks past all these grown men that are his sons, and he's got the coat of many colors. All these grown men have been working in their father's house all these years. Now, if you'll come and you're going to walk past these guys. And he's going to put the coat on the 17-year-old. Now, Joseph's got a bunch of brothers. And if he's 17, I think he's got 11 brothers. Is that right? 10 brothers, something like that. So I'm figuring that some of them are probably 10 to 20 years older than he is. Right? They're a lot older than him. They all got beards. They got dirt under their fingernails. They've been working in the fields all these years. And here's the 17-year-old brother given this coat. Now, upon reading the commentary on this, y'all just hang tight for a second. This isn't just a coat. Anybody can go get a coat, right? But this coat was given, according to the commentary I wrote, this would have been the birthright, which was a big deal. So all y'all grown men who've been working all these years for your daddy just got bypassed to your little brother. Right? Now, how does that make you feel? Not too good, right? Man, you've been doing all that work, right? All right. Y'all can be seated. I just wanted to paint a picture here. You got young Joseph. I might call you back up. So, now I don't know if that was wise on Jacob's part to do that, you know. He kind of set his youngest son up a little bit there. But anyway, if you drop to verse 8, and his brethren said to him, shall you indeed reign over us, or shall you indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet for his dreams. So we know that Joseph had 2 dreams. And can you imagine your little brother walking up to you and saying, you know, I had this dream and you bowed down to me? And then, can you imagine Jordan walking up to you, Philip, and say, you know, Dad, I had this dream, you bowed down to me too? That'd be pretty tough to hear, right? But that's what happened. And I wonder, this is just, I put my redneck interpretation on things. I just look back and wonder how things would have panned out if Joseph had just kind of kept those dreams to himself. You can't control what you dream, really. I just want to throw a quick scripture out on that. And I've got a point to all this, y'all, if y'all will just stay with me for a little while. Well, in Proverbs, it said, it is the glory, this is Proverbs 25:2, it is the glory of God to conceal a thing, but the honor of kings is to search out a matter. So I just wonder, had Joseph just kept those dreams to himself, what would have happened? We know the brother's still going to be mad because they just got bypassed for the birthright, but he probably didn't help the situation anymore. Verse 10, and he told this to his father, to his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to you to the earth? So we're going to jump over to verse 24. And like I said, I'm going to paraphrase this for time's sakes. But we know the brothers are out in the field working. Like I said, they got the dirt under their fingernails. And here's Joseph been hanging out with his daddy. So I just imagine him. He's got his coat. And he's feeling pretty good about himself. He's been promoted above all his brothers. And so they saw him coming. And in verse 24, they said, they took him and cast him into a pit. And the pit was empty and there was no water in it. Verse 27, come, let us sell him, and let our hand not be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh, and his brethren were content. So they got so mad at him, they were going to kill him. Then they cast him into a pit, and then they decided to sell him as a slave. So has anybody ever had the rug, in a figurative sense, snatched out from under you? That's kind of the way I see Joseph. Here he comes. Hey, boys, how y'all doing? Y'all doing your work okay? Can you imagine Jordan coming out there, little Philip, and be like, man, you ain't running that skidder right, boy. You'd want to slap him, right? I would. So he comes out there, wearing his coat, and they snatch the rug out from under him. They throw him in a pit. Whether he was really like that or not, he might have been the most humble guy ever. I don't know. But he had the rug snatched out from under him, right? He went from the head of his household below his father to the bottom of a pit. Anybody ever felt that way? You go from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows? Probably we have. I don't think probably any of us have ever actually been at the bottom of a pit. But I just think about, what was Joseph going through down there? I figure there's probably a little fear. Like, man, what are my brothers about to do to me? Probably a little mourning. Probably, I don't know what all type of emotion he would have been going through, but I can imagine it was pretty bad. Verse 36, and the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. So here he's sold yet again, and he does something yet again, the same thing he did to it in his father's house. Like I said, I'm paraphrasing here. He rose again to the top. Potiphar saw the blessings of the Lord on him, and he just worked. I just imagine he worked hard, and he could just see the presence of God on him. And yet again, he was made second in command in Potiphar's house. Right? So he's blessed. He's risen again, from the pit right back up to the second in command, And then Potiphar's wife, her eye caught him too. And if you know the story, she wanted Joseph, for lack of a better term. And so, let's see here. If you go to chapter 39, verse 1, and Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's captain of the guard, an Egyptian, brought him the hands. Verse 2, and the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, just like I just said, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. Verse 14, and she called unto the men of her house and spoke unto them, saying, See, he was brought in a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in to me to lie with me. I cried with a loud voice, and it came to pass, when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled and got him out. Verse 19, it came to pass when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spoke unto him, saying, After this manner did your servant to me, his anger was kindled. And Joseph's master took him, put him into prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. And the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. So here we are again. He rose up in his father's house. He rose up in Potiphar's house. And yet again, he's run smack into the wall again, really of his own, none of his own doing. You know, sometimes, I don't know why, bad things just happen. You know, maybe it's life. Maybe it's God trying to work something out in you. So he gets thrown into prison. Now about this time, my flesh is risen up and I've gotten a bad attitude. But what does Joseph do? He just keeps on going. I imagine somewhere in that prison he had to fight off some fear, some doubt. He probably had to say, I just imagine saying, God, what are you doing? I mean, what did I do to deserve this, God? You reckon those thoughts, how could he have not had these thoughts as a human being? You know, like I said, he's probably more than content to stay in his dad's house the rest of his life. And then from the bottom of the pit to the head of Potiphar's household, he's probably more than content to stay there the rest of his life. And he winds himself back up into prison for being a faithful servant and turning the wife of his master down, right? All he did was the right thing here. Verse 21, But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison. And whatsoever they did, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it prosper. Now just imagine, he could have sat there and wallowed in self-pity. Woe is me, I've done wound myself in prison by none of my wrongdoing. But he somehow maintains a good attitude. Somehow he does the right thing. And yet again, he rises up to be the best at where he's at. Are y'all getting the tone of where I'm going with this? You know, we've all wind ourselves somehow. Sometimes it's our own doing. Sometimes God's got to allow things to happen to work something in us to bring us to the place He's got for us. You know, but it's all about what we do with it. So, to save time yet again, you know, I just imagine Joseph in this prison. Like I said, he could have sat there in his chains and did nothing. And we know the butler and, was it the butler and the chef? They were thrown in the prison with him. And they were both given dreams yet again. And they were downcast because they didn't have the interpretation of them. And Joseph, like I said, Joseph could have been like, man, I ain't studying them guys. They're in prison with me. But he gives them the interpretation. And one of them was to be beheaded, and one of them was to be restored unto Pharaoh, right? Like I said, I'm paraphrasing. So he tells the one guy, he said, when you get restored, don't forget me. So obviously he didn't want to stay in the prison. Who would, right? Well, he forgot about it. And in verse 1 of chapter 41, and it came to pass that at the end of 2 full years, so he spent 2 years in this prison. 2 years of, I imagine, day in and day out, he had to get up and really seek God. Really say, okay, God, I don't know why I'm here, but I'm still trusting you. And behold, he stood by the river. And we know that Pharaoh had 2 dreams. In one, the 7 cows were eaten by the 7 good cows, were eaten by the 7 sickly cows. And so after 2 years, he remembered Joseph and he said, hey, I know this guy, he's in prison. He could probably interpret your dreams. And so I just wonder, through all the trials that Joseph went through, like I said, this is just my thoughts, all the trials he went through in those 2 years, I just think those must have been 2 years of preparation. I don't know how long he was in Potiphar's house. I don't know how long his brothers had him in that pit. But, you know, you probably go back over the course of a few years, at least. I think in the Word, through the course of all this, from beginning to end, was somewhere between 13 and 20 years. So it was quite a while, you know, but you think about all the preparation and all the lessons learned and all the molding that God was doing with Joseph. And so he interpreted Pharaoh's dreams. And in chapter 41, verse 33, and like I said, I'm just paraphrasing, guys. I'm shooting off the cuff. I didn't feel led to preach off of notes. This is just what was in my heart. Now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up a fifth part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plentiful years. So there's going to be 7 good years and 7 years of famine, right? Verse 35. And let them gather all the food of those good years, and come and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. He tells them all what to do. Verse 37. And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh. So see, when God's in it, all of a sudden you have the favor of the Lord. When you've done the right thing and you've passed your test, and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, Can we find such a one as this man, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, Forasmuch as God has showed you all this, there is none so discreet and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and according unto your word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than you. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand, and put it upon Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. Verse 46, And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh the king. So back in, I think, chapter 37 says he was 17. So you look through the course of there, that equals 13 years of trials and proving, and God working in Joseph to be what he wanted. So, has anybody ever experienced in life where, you know, you think you're doing the right thing, you're on the right path? You know, I'm not talking about your salvation, but just according to the will of God in your life, and all of a sudden you hit the wall. You know, like I said, that's what I feel like Joseph was. He was content to stay in his dad's house his whole life probably, and serve his dad and be second in command under him. But God had so much more. Amen. And so, like I said, I don't know that there's any other way to bring Joseph out of that, but God had bigger plans for him. And I can just think back over my life at different times where, you know, I thought I was doing what God wanted me to do. Like I said, not talking about our salvation here, but particular decisions we make in life. And you hit the wall and they seem so bad and they hurt so bad. And you say, well, why, God? When all the time God was just saying, I got you. I got you. You know, just, you know, all you got to do is keep the right attitude and keep doing the right thing, and I'm going to lead you and I'm going to guide you. But we often find ourselves in a pit. And sometimes it's a self-inflicted pit, and all God's trying to do is look out for us, protect us, lead us, guide us, put us where He wants us. And the whole time we're fighting Him and don't even realize it. Is that making sense to anybody? Anybody ever been there? I can look back when I was at Joanne. I was there for 12 years. You know, I was working my way up, and I was up for a promotion to be a supervisor. I wanted it so bad. Deserved it in my opinion, and didn't get it. And man, it hurt so bad. Oh, it hurt, and I didn't understand why. But you know, probably if I'd gotten it, I'd probably still be there, and I really wouldn't be on the path that God had for me. And so, see, sometimes when things hurt so bad, and you're saying, God, why? Why? I thought this was it. And it was really, I was just not really doing what He wanted me to do. And that had to happen to bring me back to the right path, the right thing, so I could hit my mark. See, He was looking out for me, and the whole time I was hurting, saying, God, why? Has anybody ever done that but me? Has anybody ever experienced that? Is anybody going through that right now? Because if you're going through it right now, your heartache may just be God saying, I'm just trying to protect you. I'm here. I've got you. I'm taking care of you. I just want the best for you. Does anybody think God wants the best for them? As I do. He's blessed me. I look back at that now, and that hurt's been replaced with, man, I'm glad I didn't get that position. Man, I'm glad that didn't happen. I'm glad I'm not in that grind anymore. And you know, for some people that may be their path, but that's not what God had for me. That was not God's best. Is this making sense to anybody? Genesis 41:55. And when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, Go unto Joseph. What he says to do, do. Now Pharaoh's got it easy now. He's like, go ask Joseph. He's got it. And so we all know, probably most of us know anyway, that in verse 42:6, Joseph was the governor over all the land. And he it was who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. So now that dream Joseph had when he was 17 has come full circle, and now his brethren are face down before him. And they didn't recognize him. Now let's paint this picture for a second. Let's say Gershom and Emilio are talking back and forth. Let's say that, because this is just some commentary I read. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but this was a really good picture for me. Gershom's talking to Emilio with a translator because they speak a different language. Even though he understands everything Emilio's saying, see. They're not seeing Joseph for who he is, and Joseph's not tipping his hat here. So they would have been talking through a translator according to the cultures and the differences in the lands. And so here he is talking to his brother through a translator. Right? So Joseph kind of gives him a hard time there. If I got thrown in a pit, you know. Jordan, would you give Philip a hard time if he threw you in a pit and sold you into slavery? Probably. I would. I'd at least pull their leg for a while. So he didn't tip his hat to him, right? And he made him jump through some hoops, you know. And like I said, this goes on for chapters. So when it's all said and done, and he makes him jump through some hoops, he's got a little brother he didn't even know he had. He makes him go back home and bring back his little brother. He called them spies, like I said, through a translator. And then after he makes him jump through all the hurdles, he tells everybody to leave other than his brothers. And then all of a sudden, he starts speaking in their dialect. Can you imagine how freaked out they'd be when he says, I'm your brother, in the same language, you know? Can you imagine talking to your brother, Emilio, and you've been talking through a translator, and all of a sudden you start speaking Spanish to him? And they're like, what? And he says, I'm Joseph, the one you sold into a slave. So see, the whole thing came full circle, and he blessed his brothers, blessed his brethren. They came to live with them. And see, all that had to happen so that God could save them. And the whole time it was in the plan of God. Chapter 45, verse 3, and Joseph said unto his brothers, I am Joseph. See, he went from talking through a translator, so he sent all them away. He said that I am Joseph in their dialect, in their language. And he says, does my father yet live? And his brothers could not answer him. They were troubled at his presence. I probably would be too. And Joseph said unto his brothers, come near to me, I pray you. And they came near, and he said, I am Joseph, your brother, who you sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved nor angry with yourselves, that you sold me hither, for God did send me before you to preserve life. Verse 8. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, and Lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. So see, even Joseph, looking back, realizes it really wasn't them. It was God the whole time, but God had to do a certain thing, a certain work, in a certain way to bring him into the fullness of what he had for him. And so, like I said, I go back and I just think, he must have experienced heartache and rejection. Think about the rejection your own family sells you away. Think about how bad that would hurt. I mean, that hurt worse than losing a position. That would hurt worse than probably most of anything we've walked through in life. Being thrown into a pit by your own brothers. Think about the hurt there. And he says, it was all God all along. And so we put ourselves in these situations, and God the whole time is looking out for us. God the whole time is wanting what's best for us. And I'm going to close with this. And if you walk through something, and probably if you can look back, anybody who's a teenage age or older can look back on something you walked through, something that didn't go the way you wanted to go in that moment. Maybe it was a bad relationship back in the day, or a bad job, or whatever it is, but you can probably look back at something that you wanted so bad and it didn't end up going your way. And now you can look back and say, oh man, thank God. Well, if you're in that situation now, this word's for you. And you need to keep God first, and you need to understand that He just wants what's best for you. He just wants to bring you to the fullness of what He created you for. You know, Joseph was never going to reach that in his father's house. But it took a lot of heartache. It took 13 years. You know, it took me, I was at Joanne for 12 years. I never thought, there was this part of me that was striving for more there, and then there's a part of me over here saying, I don't know if this, I don't think I'm going to be here forever. But it took me 4 years, which is a very short amount compared to 13, but it took me 4 years of striving and seeking God on when I'm going to leave this place. But He had to bring me to that place of lowness, and it wasn't until after I got snuffed for that position that I realized, okay, this is not it. This is not it. Where do I need to go from here, God? And from that point forward, it took about 4 years for me to leave there. And it's not, I wanted to go, but it took that time of preparation. It took that time for me to understand what God had for me, when God had it for me, and to walk it out in His timing. Is that making sense? And I tell you, I was sitting there, yesterday I was studying some, Lauren was playing some worship, and this verse came up in my spirit. And you know, when you walk through things and you can look back at it, and like I said, if you're in something now, 5 years from now, you may look back and say, wow, God, I can see your plan so clearly now. And so my sermon today is to exhort you, encourage you. You know, God has never left you. He's never forsaken you. You know, He's just trying to bring about the best out of you. And so this is very familiar, but it just makes so much life in it when you can look back at things. Romans 8:28. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to His purpose. Doesn't mean everything's going to go your way all the time, but the heartache works together for good. Verse 29. For whom He did foreknow, He also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of His Son, that He might be the firstborn among many brethren. Moreover, whom He did predestinate them, He also called, and whom He called them, He also justified. And whom He justified them, He was also glorified. Looking back, do you think Joseph was justified in the end of that story? I think he was justified a little bit. Verse 31. What shall we then say to these things? If God be for us, who can be against us? He that spared not his own Son, but delivered him up for us all, how shall he not with him also freely give us all things? Who shall lay anything to the charge of God's elect? It is God that justifieth. Who is he that condemneth? It is Christ that died, yea, rather, that is risen again, whom is even at the right hand of God, who also maketh intercession for us. So the whole time we're hurting, the whole time we think we're suffering, He's at the right hand of the Father, and He's interceding on our behalf. And it hurts so bad, and He's right there with us the whole time. Verse 35, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? As it is written, for thy sake we are killed all the day long. We are counted as sheep for the slaughter. Nay, in all these things we are more than conquerors through Him that loved us. For I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. So whatever you're going through today, He is right there. Reach out and grab Him and just embrace whatever He's trying to do in your life, whatever He's trying to work in you. He is trying to make you the best version of yourself that you can be. So right now what I want to do is just, if you're having a hard time, I think about, like I said, they could see Joseph in that prison and the hand of God on him. You got to get the presence of God on you. And as I was reading this scripture, and Lauren was playing this song yesterday, and I'm going to play it today. We're familiar with it, but I want to play it because it was just life to me. Has anybody ever had that moment where something is good, but it became real good? And it just became life in that moment to me. And I'm not much of a crier, but I kind of teared up a little bit just thinking about the goodness of God and about how the different times in my life where I could say, oh God, why am I going through this? And the whole time He just wanted what was best for me. So if y'all can play the song, we're all familiar with it. If everybody wants to stand up, worship, I want the elders to come down. And I want the elders to just stretch out and wrap around, leave the altar open. You can come, repent, give this situation to God. It's not about how strong you are, but how strong He is. So let's just worship God. Give this weight up and give it to God. He's just trying to work in you, work through you. If you need prayer, the elders are up here. The altar's open.